Hi everyone, so welcome to Let's Talk UPSC. So, in this, basically, what we are going to study is we are going to do the topic of sociology as a science, right? So, we are going to do this topic of sociology as a science. Under this, we are basically going to focus on certain components like what exactly is this subject called science, and what is a scientific method, and the critique of it, right? And the critique of it. After this, after completing this part, we will be basically studying about sociology, right? Sociology and how it can be a science, which is what the positivists argue, and how sociology is not a science, right? So how sociology is not a science, which is what the non-positivists argue, right? So these two are some two of the most important schools of sociology. So here let us start with the first thing, that is science, scientific method, and its critique. So under this, the first question that we have to ask is what exactly is the science, right? So we have been talking right from the first lecture, like whether sociology is a science or whether it is not a science and all, right? So for that we need to understand what basically the science is. What is this concept of science, a subject being called a science? So in our school days we might have studied science, right? We might have studied several branches of science, like we might have studied physics, and we might have studied chemistry, biology, zoology, right? So these are the simple things that we have already studied in the school, right? If you look at these subjects, what do you think is so much different in these subjects compared to subjects like social sciences is something that we have done in school, which includes civics, geography, history, right? And obviously civics sometimes also includes in the later classes politics or political science, right? So why are we always using this thing called the science here, right? What is this science? So science is nothing but a subject or a body which is a systematized body of knowledge. It's a systematized body of knowledge which basically focuses on empirical data, So now you might be wondering as to what is this empirical data. Empirical data is nothing but the data that we use on day to day basis, right? For example, in the previous classes also I gave you the example of the onion peel example, wherein we try to see the onion peel through a microscope in order to find out the stomata in it, right? In order to find the stomata in it, so we are believing that plants perform their respirational functions through this part in their leaf called the stomata. And how do we believe this? We believe this because of the presence of the empirical data, that is here the experiment that we perform, right? So the experiment becomes the basis for us to trust this, right? And this becomes the science. And now as far as we know, this is an established fact, right? And this becomes a systematized body of knowledge, right? So this is how science is. It is basically a systematized body of knowledge which is based on empirical data, right? And whenever this empirical data is tested, it will be the same for every aspect, right? So even if I do the testing, or even if you people do the testing, the result of this experiment will be the same, right? Except obviously there are certain exceptions, but for the majority of us the results will be the same. So that is what science is, right? So science is nothing but a systematized body of knowledge that is based on empirical data. So a lot of significance is given to this empirical data, right? So that is what science basically is. Now if we come back, or if we basically look into the other aspects, right, just a second. Okay. Yeah, if we look into the other aspects of what exactly science deals with, right? So science basically, if you see science, it has certain methods by which we can basically conclude a subject as a science. And for that, the basic thing is that whenever you do a scientific experiment, you record it, right? And the way you record it is something that becomes important, right? So firstly, you take in the hypothesis, right? You have certain research problem, for which you frame an hypothesis, then you conduct the experiment, and on the basis of this experiment you come at a result. So this is how a science experiment is conducted, right? So the next part is, what are the methods, I mean, what are the certain things that make science a science, right? So what is the method of science, or what makes science a science, right? So there are certain methods, like here you have methods like intersubjective reliability, right? So what is this intersubjective reliability? Science is an intersubjective reliable subject. That means the findings of science can be used in many other disciplines as well, right? So if a particular study is true in science, then it can be used in other subjects as well. So that is where this concept of intersubjective reliability comes in. The second one is objectivity, right? So don't be confused with IOQU. It is a form in which I remember these things. So intersubjective reliability is the first one defining characteristics of science. The second one is objectivity. Objectivity here basically refers that whenever a person is committing any um, experiment, right? Whenever a person is making any experiment, he has to be objective, right? He cannot be someone who has emotions over this, right? So he has to be an objective person, basically conducting the experiment to get objective solution, right? Objective result. So that is how science is. It is very objective. In ethics paper of UPSC also, there is this thing called objectivity, right? How civil servants should be objective. And basically it tells that you have to follow the rules and laws and regulations to the T, right? So everything, the laws and the regulations should be basically followed to the T meaning, that means that every law should be followed as it is said. However, sometimes, we are often also told that, objectivity should also be sometimes coupled with certain type of compassion, and that is what is good for a civil servant, right? So this is something that we learn when we do ethics. But here science doesn't say that, you have to have this compassion. It doesn't say that. Science basically says you have to be objective as far as possible. Then the third one is quantifiability. So whatever results you obtain from an experiment in science is quantifiable. So what do you mean by quantifiable? Quantifiable meaning you can express them in certain measures, units of measures. For example, distance is measured in what? Distance is measured in kilometers, meters, centimeters, millimeters, right? And weight is measured in grams, kilograms, tons, quintals, right? So all this is how, they are quantifiable. We have certain fixed ways in which we can quantify science experiments, right? The fourth one is nothing but universal testability. Universal testability. And what does this mean? It's again very simple. Universal testability means nothing but whatever you do in science, right? Whatever you do in science can be applied anywhere, can be basically applied anywhere. For example, gravity. Okay, gravity. Today I am in India, and if I throw an apple in the sky, okay, obviously it will fall on the ground. And if I'm in US and I throw an apple in the sky, obviously it is going to fall down again in the same way. And if at all the mass of the apple is the same, then except for the gravity constant, which sometimes changes from place to place, the speed at which the apple falls or the height at which the apple reaches, everything also can be calculated given in the two circumstances, because science gives you this universal testability. It gives you universal formulas which you can apply anywhere and which you can test at every place, and it will be correct for all the given reasons, right? So that is how science is. Science is something which basically gives you an idea of how things are, with the main weapon that it uses is called the empirical data, that it uses, right? So empirical data and the systematized body of knowledge. So this is what science is. Now you might be wondering as to why, is sociology now being pronounced as a science, right? How has sociology got to do anything with science, right? So even in the earlier classes we have said that there are two types of schools of sociology. The first one is positivism, and the second one is non-positivism, right? So in positivism, basically what the scholars under positivism like Comte, Durkheim, Marx, so what do these people argue, right? So then we have other non-positivists, and somewhere in the middle of them lies Weber, and there are other non-positivists like phenomenologists, and you also have ethno methodologists. And mind you, the phenomenologists and ethnomethodologists basically do not believe in science. Okay, in fact, ethnomethodologists go to that extent of even questioning as to why do we need science. So that is why these two also become very, very important for us to study. But in positivism, what we are going to study is we are going to study how these scholars basically said sociology is a science. Whereas Weber says that no, sociology is not a complete science, neither can it completely be understood as a common science, but it can be understood with a combination of both of them. And he was in fact the first person who moved away from the positivist school, and that is why we place him in between. We don't call him a non-positivist in as much as he says that certain things can be quantified under sociology as well. But he also says in his very famous social action theory, he says, and I quote him when he says that there cannot be an objective science of society, right? There cannot be an objective science of society, since social action must be understood in terms of the meanings that a human attaches to those actions. For example, in his social action theory, don't worry, we'll be doing it in the later classes of what exactly the social action theory is. But for just to make you aware of what Weber tries to say in his theory, he basically says that every person does certain social actions, and social action is nothing again action which is guided towards the society, right? For example, let's say I am throwing a rock at a person, right? So the reason this action can be perceived by many people, right? This action can be perceived by many people, and many people will have many interpretations of this action. For example, my mother might see this and she might say, what happened to this girl all of a sudden? Why is she throwing rocks at some random person? My father also might say it. He also might think the same. My brother might see it. He knows a little background of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So he might think he's angry at that person because he did something to her. But only I know the real reason. Only I know the real reason. I know the exact reason. And the exact reason being that this person is a thief. He stole something from me. So I got angry and I'm throwing a rock at him. So here, the social action can only be understood by the meaning that is attached to the social action by the doer. So here the doer is who? In this scenario, the doer is me. And why am I throwing a rock at a person? Is because that is a thief and he stole my purse or he stole my belongings, and that is why I threw a rock at him. So this is what social action theory is. But the other persons might not understand why I did it because they do not have the background. Like my brother knew she's angry, but he doesn't really know what is exactly happening. But my mom and dad were completely clueless, right? So this is what Weber says when he says that, the social action theory basically says that there is no objective science of society. You cannot objectively say that, society behaves in this way. There is always this concept of how you perceive whatever you do in a society, right? And that perception of you becomes what is important to understand the society around you, right? So that is why we place Weber in between, right? So now let us come back to the topic of positivism. Let us do positivism in detail, right? So who are these positivists? I told you they are no one but a very old and very famous Auguste Comte, Emile Durkheim, and Karl Marx is also a positivist. Okay, and why are we calling them positivists? Okay, the word positivism basically in sociology means that sociology is nothing but a science. They basically argue that sociology is a science. And what does one mean when they say sociology is a science? They mean that it basically follows these four things, that is I, O, U, and Q. We did this right. One is intersubjective reliability, objectivity, quantifiability, and universal testability. All these things are something that sociology also performs, is what the positivists argue. Very, very simple, right? Very simple. This is the idea of positivism, wherein basically they say that sociology is a science, meaning that it follows all these four objectives, right? Now let us see how they basically tell this, right? So the first reason they give for this is that the first reason is that there are laws. Okay, and these laws of the society are basically determined by the society on the basis of norms and values. Okay, let us take an example here. To understand sociology, basically you need to have a lot of examples in your hand, which you can use randomly according to the question that is asked. So the first example I would like to take here, you know that, like let's say this is a classroom. Okay, this is a classroom. There are students sitting here, and a teacher walks in. Okay, this is the first class. A teacher walks in, and the first impression of the students is the first time they are seeing him. Now they understand that the teacher is a male teacher, and after he completes the class duration is 50 minutes or something, and the class is over. The second day class starts. Okay, and the teacher hasn't come yet, but what can the students know for a fact is that a male teacher is gonna come, he's gonna teach, he's going to be wearing formal clothes, okay, a shirt and a formal pant, right? And this is something the students can tell even before the teacher comes in. Why? Because it is nothing but the norms and values. You know that a male teacher in an educational institution should wear formal shirts and formal pants. So this is a norm and value that the society has set, and these norms and values become nothing but the laws of the society, right? So that is why positivists basically say, see, all this information is something we never know, but we are able to still tell it. And why? Because sociology is a science. And the science here, basically, the first rule of sociology as a science is that there are certain norms and values of the society which guide the society. For example, let me give you another example. Let us say instead of a male teacher, it was a female teacher. Can you tell me certain things which, obviously, the female teacher, she has, feminine voice. This is something, obviously, feminine voice. And she would wear a sari if it's a very prestigious education institution, or a normal formal dress in a very decent kurti and all, right? And then she would wear nice sandals. Okay, these are something which will tell definitely. Now what would she never do? Okay, she would never wear some club dress to a class. Obviously a teacher would never wear some short dress and come to a class, because it is not appropriate for that particular institute, right? She can obviously wear it in a party if she's going to a party in a club or a pub or whatever she wants to, but in an educational institution this is not what is allowed. And who is telling all this, whether it is allowed or not allowed? It is the society again, right? So, and the society basically now is making a science. It is telling that this is the rule. So basically when rules are there, when regulations are there, that means society is nothing but it is being governed by science, and sociology is a science. And the other things, the teacher will not wear a slipper, the bathroom slipper. Would she wear a bathroom slipper to the class? Obviously no. And yeah, and would she use a phone in the class? Would she use and talk to her family in the class? No. Obviously these are something she can never do unless and until obviously it's an emergency, for which also she has to go out of the class and then speak, right? So these are the different ways in which society is already planned. We just follow the laws of the society. The society is already having the laws and we just follow them, right? We are nothing but blind followers of it. And when we are blindly following something and it is true in almost all the scenarios, right, then it is nothing but it's a science, right? So this is the first thing that the positivists argue, right? I hope you understood this. And the second one, now let's come back to the second point which they say, right? The second point that they say, or that they stress upon, is the objectivity, right? So we have seen how science is an objective study, right? And we have seen how basically objective means you have to base your opinions or your views on facts or on statistics, right? For example, in science, if there is an election that is performed, right? In India, we have the first past the post system, right? FPTP system is there. That is what we follow in India, wherein any candidate that gets the highest number of votes in an election, even if it is by single vote, even if it is plus one vote also, he wins, right? So for example, let us take an example where there are two parties, A and B, and A got 500 votes and B got 600 votes out of the total, let's say 1200 votes, and 100 votes are for other people. Now who is the winner? Obviously B is the winner. And how did you know this? It is an objective fact because it is subjected by data. The data here says that 600 is greater than 500, meaning that B has one more number of votes than A, meaning that B is going to be the party that is going to win the elections, right? So this is nothing but objectivity. And how objectivity is there in sociology? Can we all think of an example where objectivity is there in sociology? Obviously we can think of an example like that. For example, I am conducting a research, okay? Let me take a research. And the topic of this research is that how religion is pervading the modern life, right? What are the effects of religion on a modern life, right? So for this I will collect data, right? I will go to society A, B, C, D, see how people are basically following religion in the modern world. In B also I'll do it, C also I'll do, and D also I'll do. I'll collect all the data and then I will frame a summary of it, and then at the end I'll give a conclusion, right? Though it is a sociological research, whether religion is pervading the modern life or not, at the end when I arrive at a conclusion, it basically says that I have followed the objectivity because I have based it on the data that I have collected from A, B, C and D societies, right? So that is how sociology follows this aspect of objectivity, right? In fact, sociology believes, according to the positivists, that whatever knowledge can be sensed through sensory knowledge, that is what you can see, feel and touch. That is all nothing but sociology. That is what sociology considers as to be true, and that is what is all sociology concerns itself with, right? So that is another thing that the positivists tell us, right? So what is the next thing that they say? They say that the subject matter of sociology should be treated in the exact similar way of the subject matter of science, right? So for example, if you're going to conduct certain experiment in science, in the same way human beings also should be experimented with, is what the positivists argue, right? We will see the critiques of this in the next part, wherein we say ki why this thinking of positivism itself is wrong. But for now, the positivists argue that the subject matter of sociology should be treated in the similar manner as a subject matter in science, right? And the next thing that the positivists say is that sociologists also come to certain conclusions on the basis of experimentation and observation, right? Here you can quote the very important study of Emile Durkheim, wherein he studied the Arunta tribes of Australia. Sorry, this is tribes. The Arunta tribes of Australia. And he gave out a theory of religion, a very famous theory of religion, when we'll do in the next classes, when we do Durkheim. And he basically says, talks about totemism in it. And he also tells about how, there is no God. He basically says there is no God, but worship of God is nothing but the worship of society itself. This is what Durkheim says, right? So how did he arrive at this conclusion? From this experiment, the experiment that he conducts on these studying the Arunta tribes, right? So that is nothing but experimentation and observation. So first he conducts the experiment, then he observes it also, right? And that is how he reaches at this conclusion. There is also another theory of Durkheim on suicide, right? And he basically, in the suicide, it's a very, very, very interesting topic, wherein he basically says how suicide is not an individual factor, not an individual choice. Okay. Usually in today's society, if we see a person commits a suicide, we obviously label that person. For example, say A committed suicide, okay, and he died, he passed away. What do we say about A? We say that maybe he has undergone a lot of trouble in his life, or maybe he has been a lonely person in his life, or he was a coward, that he couldn't face any difficulties in life, and that's why he took away his own life and now he is dead, right? So this is what in general we talk about a person who has committed suicide. But Durkheim says that it is not A's mistake, but it is the level of integration in a society, and the moral cohesion in the society, right? If these both are high, then the suicide rates would be low. And in society where there is no integration and where there is no cohesion, then the suicide rate is always high. This is the theory of Durkheim's suicidology, the theory name is. And he basically brings out this very interesting study of how suicide is not an individual thing. And how did he reach? He reached it through the data that is provided to him by the police officers on the different suicide cases, right? And the data, he experimented on the different people, he observed them, and he came at this conclusion, right? So now I think you are able to understand how sociology is a sort of something wherein you basically experiment and you come out of an observation, right? So that is the other thing, right? And the next thing that sociologists, especially the positivists, argue is that the sociology, whatever sociologists basically term as a fact, is not arbitrary or random. There are fixed rules. And for this, the example you can take again of the teacher. The teacher, a male teacher, is supposed to wear a formal pant and shirt. A politician is supposed to wear a white shirt. Most of the politicians do that, right? And an actress is supposed to be fashionable. Who laid down all of these things? Did you and me do it? No. The society has made these generalized truths, right? So this is what sociology deals with. It's the generalized truths. They are general and they can basically be determined by social forces, right? And these are the reasons why, sociology is basically called a science by the positivists, right? So herein, let us go back and let us basically revise it once as to why sociology is a science. Firstly, it is because the laws of the society provide for it, right? There are certain fixed norms and values. Secondly, the objectivity, that is facts and statistics are used to ascertain whether a particular thing is true or not. Thirdly, it's based on sensory knowledge, that is whatever you see, feel and touch. These are the only three things that it takes into consideration. Fourthly, the subject matter of sociology is to be treated in the same way as the subject matter of science. The critique of it we'll see in the next part. Fifthly, it is based on experimentation and observation. And then you have this fact that it is a generalized truth. It is not something which is arbitrary or random. That means you can guess, if a person is a politician, you can guess that he is going to come out in a white kurti, right? White kurti or white shirt or something like that, right? So these are the things that positivist sociology is basically saying, right? So now let us look into the critique of positivism, right? The critique of positivism, wherein we will understand what the non-positivists basically are trying to say, right? You can also call them as anti-positivists, right? So the non-positivists or the anti-positivists basically say that how can sociology be similar to science? Firstly, the subject matter is so much different, right? So much different. You remember in one of the classes that I did previously, I gave you this example of a pendulum, right? If you have seen the before classes, a pendulum goes this side, and as a science student, I might record the timings of this, and then come at a conclusion and also come at a formula, right? For example, instead of a pendulum, I ask Alex to stand here and then go to this place and then go to this place. Alex might stand here and he might take 2 minutes to go here. He might take 1 minute to go here. And now when I ask Betty to come and stand here, Betty might take 5 minutes. And to go this side, she might take 10 minutes. That's her wish, right? That is A's wish, B's wish. And by the wishes means that the human consciousness. The objects, the subject matter in science doesn't have feelings, no feelings. Does a pendulum have any feeling? It doesn't have any feeling. But a human is nothing but a product of his thoughts, right? A human is nothing but a product of his thoughts. And from this, basically, one thing you have to understand is that if a person doesn't have thoughts, if he is not having thoughts, that means he is not a human, right? This is a very famous quote said by who, I don't know, but I don't remember it. I will get back to you in the next class about it. However, basically what here it is being said is that human's consciousness is something that differentiates him from other animals and non-living things, right? So non-positivists or anti-positivists basically argue that the subject matter is never the same in science and sociology. In science, the subject matter is constant. You can do any experiment on them. But in sociology, the subject matter has its own consciousness. The human consciousness is what makes it a different part or a different subject matter that is not related to the primary subject matter that we use in the sciences, right? So that is a basic critique of it, right? That is a basic critique of what positivists try to say. And Weber like I said in the social action theory, Weber was one of the biggest critiques, and he basically says that there are certain many problems that one deals with. And the second thing you can basically try to quote is Atkinson. Atkinson, he is a phenomenologist. Right? So Atkinson basically on Durkheim's suicide. Atkinson basically critiques it and says that this is a wrong study. Completely ignoring the human reasons is wrong. Completely ignoring the human reasons is wrong according to Atkinson. And why does he say so? In Durkheim's study, we have seen that Durkheim has made the theory of suicide, wherein he says that if the integration in a society is high, and the social cohesion, that is the bonding, cohesion meaning bonding between person to person, right? Bonding between a person to person is high, that means the suicide rates are low. This is the theory of Durkheim, right? And how did he arrive at this theory? He arrived at this theory basically by police records, and he also arrived at by testimonies of witnesses, testimonies or suicide letters or whatever, right? Now Atkinson basically tells that this method is wrong. And why does he say wrong? Obviously police records do have the information that are there, but would the records necessarily say what A was feeling? For example, let us say A committed suicide. Okay, A committed suicide. However, A's family does not want it to come outside. Because why? Because in a family where suicide happens, basically the society labels the family saying that don't know what A's father did to him, don't know how torture A must have gone through from his family, that he committed suicide. This is how the society talks, and we all as a family don't want the society to talk bad about the family. So what does the family do? They try, or they even bribe the police, telling that please don't record this as a suicide, instead make it an accident, because we don't want the society to know and then blame us for the suicide of A, right? So here Atkinson basically says that this is what happens in real life. There are many cases where suicides are covered up, and the reason for this is because the suicides happen as a way of how A feels, and the family always tries to cover up them, and in these cases we never know the actual reason. We never know the actual reasons of why suicide is happening. And there might be many cases which are never reported in the police station of suicides, because obviously again the basic premise here is that the family feels shame in actually telling, my son has committed a suicide, or someone from my family has committed suicide and died, right? There's a shame associated with it, right? And that is what Atkinson brings in his theory of suicide, wherein he says that Durkheim's suicide theory is flawed. This cannot definitely be the only reason. He says that there are many other reasons for why a suicide happens, which are not coming into the forefront. That is because A himself doesn't say the reason, or his family conceals it, or the society conceals it, right? So when there are these many influences that are happening on a single thing, how can whatever came out of it be objective, right? That is what Atkinson questions. He says that objectiveness cannot be a question here at all, because here there are many factors that are basically hindering the police records, and the police records are something that are trusted by Durkheim in his theory. And when he is recording certain police records or trusting certain police records which by themselves are not objective, then how can Durkheim claim his theory to be objective, right? So Atkinson, by using this basic premise, does away with the theory of suicides of Durkheim, and he says that the human presence or the human influence on suicides is much much higher than what actually can be thought of, right? So that is one of the greatest critique of Durkheim's theory of suicide. We'll again do this when we do the theory of suicide, but this is the reason for it. Now let us see the practical problems. Let us see the practical problems that one encounters while dealing with sociology as a science. So the first one is the problem of experimentation. How can you basically bring in all the people into a room and then experiment on them? Can you really do this? Can you bring in all the population of the entire world into a single room and then tell them, you should do this, you should do that? Half of the people will escape this prison on the first day itself. You never know how many people are there, how many men are there, how many female are there. You will never be able to contain them in a single place, right? So that is why it is not experimentally feasible. It is not feasible at all. The cost that it includes, the effort that is taken, it's not practical at all, right? The second reason is the budget. The sociologists, whenever they are creating any sort of research, the budget they have is very limited. In as much, that means that the budget they have is very limited, and the budget cannot be used to cover everything and anything, right? So that is the second problem of basically treating sociology as a science and connecting everything in a particular research manner, right? And the third one is the problem of privacy, right? So if I go to a particular household and tell them, I'm going to do this particular research, and the research is on domestic violence, let us say domestic violence, and I now bring the wife and the husband. A is the wife, B is the husband, and I ask A, is your husband hitting you daily? Okay, this is a question, sorry, but if this question is asked, is B hitting you every day? Would A answer honestly? Obviously she wouldn't. Even if he is hitting, she would say no. Why? Because again she thinks of the society, how the society would feel, and should also think of the after effects. After I go, B would again hit her because obviously she's told him that B is hitting her. Obviously this is an issue of privacy, and then people don't speak it out. And then comes in the cases of ethical issues also. In the same case, if I have to see how domestic violence is happening, what do I do in this case? Should I say B, go hit A, let me see how she feels, let me basically take the experiment into consideration and let me come at a conclusion? Is that ethical enough on my part to basically let them undergo all this pain? Right? It is not. So therein comes the ethical issues, right? Ethical issues in making sociology as a science. Then comes the basic issue of quantification and measurement. For example, in science, like I said, for distance you have length, not length. In distance you have kilometers, meter, centimeter, etc. In weights you have grams, kilograms, tons, etc. In the same way, in sociology, if for example let us take a family, okay, family A and family B. Let us compare them both. Now, to measure the amount of love, how can I measure the amount of love in family A? Can I say that the love is 100 kgs? Can I say here that the love is 10 kgs? Can I quantify them? No, obviously I cannot do that. It will be very, very improper, because it again depends on how A is and how B is. For example, if A is a family which is very, orthodox and not so much into showing love and affection, they do everything silently. Like, fathers these days don't usually show their children that they love so much, but it is usually the father that loves their children a lot. But they don't show it. They do it in their actions. When it's your birthday, your father gets you some gift that you like or some sweet that you like. That is the way love is thrown. Love is shown in certain orthodox patriarchal families. But in B, which is a very modern family, giving 10,000 as a pocket money is a form of love, right? So how can you quantify this? Is this chocolate box of worth 500 rupees greater than the rupees 10,000? Can you quantify in this way? Because the love cannot be expressed in money. Expressing love in the terms of money is absolutely wrong. And that is why it is very, very difficult to measure or difficult to quantify in sociology, because it is a lot involving a lot of emotions, lot of relationships, right? And lot of other things which cannot be mathematically processed, right? They cannot be mathematically processed, right? And then you have the problem of generalization. So earlier when I said that sociology brings in generalized values, for example, if there is a female teacher in a school, she is expected to wear a sari, or she is expected to wear a formal kurta, right? She's expected to wear a decent sandals. Okay, she won't wear a club going dress, she won't wear bathroom going slippers in a class, right? Obviously this is what is expected of a teacher. For example, uh, in generalization, against generalization, anti-positivists basically say that generalization cannot be done everywhere. For example, marriage, okay, in India versus USA, are they similar? Though marriage is a common concept, but are they similar here and here? No. In India, marriage is considered to be a family affair. In USA, it is an individual affair. In India, the family decides. There are mostly arranged marriages, and the family decides what the bride should be, how the bridegroom should be, how the other family should be. Here, it's an individual choice. You go, you date for a period of time, and then you marry. And even your marriage is done by yourself. Here, the parents do the marriage. They arrange the marriage venue, everything. Here, nothing like that. People do it on their own. And sometimes even the parents are not even asked to come, right? Everything is told after the marriage happens. So that is why this is something the anti-positivists say, that generalizations can be in certain cases but not in all cases, right? So that is the problem of generalization. Next, then there is a problem of objectivity, right? There's a problem of right. So how can objectivity be a problem? That is what something you might basically think, right? For that we need to understand what is this objectivity, right? So objectivity means that the conclusions that are arrived at as a result of inquiry are independent of race, color, creed, occupation, religion, nationality, moral preferences, and political predispositions of the investigator. So whatever conclusion I arrive at after a particular research is done, they are free from all biases and prejudices, right? You basically focus them only on data and statistics. There are no biases, no prejudices, nothing related to the race, nothing related to your caste. Even if I do certain experiment, and even if you do certain experiment, the result of it will be the same. That is what objectivity is, right? But is this really possible in the real world? For example, let us take a study of a tribal society, right? Tribal society study. Now, there are two people. One is A, one is B. These are the researchers who are going to this tribal society to understand the different tribal customs and how the tribal life is. A is a tribal person himself. B is a caste Hindu. He is a caste Hindu, right? Now let us see how they both go to the tribal society, right? For example, there is some festival that is happening in the tribal society, right? There is certain festival, any festival for that matter, where there is animal sacrifice happening. In tribal society, animal sacrifice is very common in any festival, right? Now if A sees it, what would he feel? He would feel ki it is a common practice, right? It's common thing, and he'd record it as a common thing. And when B sees it, how would he react? He'd say ki, my god, these people are killing an animal and it's a wrong practice. He labels it as wrong because obviously he's from a caste Hindu, and you can even consider him to a Brahmin, and Brahmins obviously don't belong to this category of animal sacrifice or even eating animals for that matter. Whereas A knows and he understands why this is done. This is done because it's a practice that has been followed by them from their ancestors, and that is being followed ever since, right? But that is not how B perceives it, and that is where the prejudices of A and B come in. Their already knowledge that A is a tribal person, he already has the knowledge of tribal customs, and that is why he never thinks of whatever the tribals do in a negative way. But B, who is a caste Hindu Brahmin, he basically has certain predispositions that, animal sacrifice is wrong, we shouldn't eat animals. All these are his predispositions, and because of these predispositions that he has, because of these biases or prejudices, both of them come to different conclusion. They come to a different conclusion with respect to what is a tribal society, and this is what is a problem of objectivity, right? So the problem of objectivity, basically, according to anti-positivists, is that prejudices, values are bound to affect the researcher at each and every step of the research that he is undertaking, right? So that is what is the problem of objectivity, right? And so that basically ends up this thing wherein we have discussed a lot of things, and a quick recap of whatever we did in the last 5 minutes, wherein we started with the critique. Firstly, we started about how anti-positivists basically say that the subject matter is different, and we have seen Atkinson's critique of Durkheim's suicide. We have seen the practical problems like the problem of experimentation, the budget which is limited, problem of privacy, ethical issues, quantification and measurement, the problem of generalization, wherein we have taken the example of marriages, problem of objectivity at the last, right? So this ends up the basic thing wherein we have talked about science, its critique and the method that science uses, and sociology as a science. We have seen how the positivists have basically brought in their own views of how sociology is as a science, whereas the anti-positivists or the non-positivists, starting from Weber to other ethnometeorologists and phenomenologists, all of this claimed sociology is not a science. We have seen the critique of it, and this basically completes the chapter, right? And we'll meet you in the next video on the series, and stay tuned and subscribe the channel if you like the videos, and comment if you have any comments to post. That's all for today. Let's meet in the next class, and bye.